Hi, welcome to New Jersey Wedding Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are your hosts, Andrea Pertel and Celia Milton, and we have had so many great um, interviews lately, right, Celia?
Oh
We've
yeah.
had so many great venues, which are fabulous for couples as we enter engagement season. And the first thing you're
Mhm.
looking for is your venue. And we've just had so many, and we have many more coming up.
Yeah, we got some
So
interesting
it's
people
been
coming up.
very fun and informative and exciting. And let's hear about, this group of venues and beach venues and venues with hotels and rustic venues. It's just been great. But today I'm very excited about today's guest because it's something that it's not the most fun thing
It's
to
not
think about.
glamorous, not
No,
at
it's
all.
it's
No.
not the cake tasting. It's not
Nope.
help me choose my dress. But it is very important, and it is something that all couples need to think about.
Yeah.
This in particular, the bride going into a marriage, and we spoke to bride lawyers,
Yeah, fabulous. Mother-daughter team, which I think is
attorneys,
fantastic, of
both attorneys.
attorneys in New York and New Jersey. And what I really loved about their approach to talking about things is that it's not going into the various legal bits of planning a marriage with this idea of like, well, we don't need that because we're never going to split up. It's like that's not it at all. I mean, we start out talking with ensuring. I that like shocked me when she says like
80%
people
couples don't
don't
have the ring insured.
seriously. You've had them roll into the sand. I've had them fall into ponds behind me. It's like, oh yeah, we've had grease traps removed and
Yeah,
things snaked looking for rings. It's like
insure
get
that
the
ring
get
right
the thing as
away.
soon as you take it out of the store. Our engagement stories were like, well, we tracked up the Appalachian Mountains and I had the ring in my pocket. It's like, are you nuts? Get it
Yeah,
like
yeah. I've got
insured.
I've got the 3-year-old bringing the real rings on our
Oh my,
beach ceremony. What are
oh,
you great?
what?
I won't
Or
even touch the rings at a beach
I don't touch them.
ceremony. I
I don't
have
touch
them
them.
hand it directly to
Nope.
the bride and groom. I take myself out of that
I'm
equation.
out of that. And then, of course, we have the rings being brought in by a falcon, which we may talk about later episode. But it's just like all I see is rings flying through the air and landing in water.
But
That's
even
all I
before
see.
your wedding, you're wearing, as they mentioned, this is your first. Quite often, it is
Yes.
your first piece of expensive
Yeah.
real jewelry that you wear on a daily
Every day.
basis.
Yep.
You could
Yep.
lose it anywhere before the
Mhm.
wedding. The stone could fall out. It could get you could be
To
sorry
get
to say,
damaged.
robbed or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
it needs to be insured. So we start off with that,
Yeah.
but then, there's all couples are getting married later in life.
Right.
Then there are also second marriages. You might already own your own home. You might have grown children. You might, what you come into that marriage with. A prenup is always a great idea, or a
Yeah.
will too. A
Yeah.
will is very important, especially if you have children from a previous marriage, or you own things, or you've inherited. Maybe you have an
Yeah.
inheritance from your
Yeah.
parents, or somebody, another family member who has passed, and you already have this inheritance before you get married. There's a lot to think
There's
about.
a lot to think about. Or you've got a business,
Yeah.
or in one of my couple's cases, you've got a gigantic collection of action figures that needs to be protected, which yeah. But I thought that their way of approaching it is very much
Very
it's
approachable,
very
very practical.
warm and not like, well, let's, figure this out in case we get divorced. There's a lot of other contingencies and a lot of other scenarios that should be taken care of. And I thought that they presented that really well in a very comforting kind of way, to
Yeah.
sort of um kind of like envision a difficult time that may happen, and it may not have anything to do with either partner, but knowing that things are going to be taken care of when you're not in a state of confusion and and hysteria sometimes. I think that's a really good thing. And they're lovely. I really like
Right.
them
They're
a lot.
very lovely, very approachable. They're
I like
very
them a lot.
smart. They're lawyers.
Yep.
But
Yep.
in talking to them, you feel like you could ask them any question and they can
Yes.
guide you. And one thing that I found very interesting that they talk about is um, the popularity of cohabitation
Yes.
kind of prenups. And we've run into that. There are reasons. To get married. A lot of times,
Yes.
health insurance, things like that. Obviously, you love one another and you want to build a family
Right.
together. But there are reasons also, and it's more prominent in older couples who've been married before, to just simply cohabitate because of, the way things are with the government.
Yes.
Maybe you're widowed, you're collecting Social Security
Right.
or a pension, and it's not in your favor to
Yeah.
get legally have that legal document of marriage. So there's so many different aspects to think about and
Yeah.
talk about, and they're very approachable. And I thought it was very insightful. Their
Yeah.
website,
Their
Bride
website's great.
Lawyer, they have a lot of helpful guides, guidebooks. They have a YouTube channel. I think it's very informative. Yeah,
Yeah, I did too. For something that, it doesn't seem like fun, but as we
important.
all learned from COVID and Sandy, and there are things that we need to protect ourselves, in the event of these things happening. And I think that you just feel better after you do it,
Right.
and then you can go taste the cake.
Right, right, right. And if you are a vendor, a wedding vendor listening to this, they also specialize in vendor
Yes.
contracts that are good for both the vendor and the couple, clearly stated what you offer and what your responsibilities are.
Right.
And so they touch on that too. So that's very important as well. We
Yeah.
have contracts.
Yeah. And then they're meant, honestly, they're meant to protect everybody.
Hmm.
Um, so everybody knows what exactly the expectations are. And, it gives us a footing to stand on if something doesn't go exactly the way either any of us expect. And I,
Yeah.
I think that that's really, it's not very glamorous, but it's something that can really take some of the stress out of the overall process.
Right, right. Yeah, it's a great interview. So stay tuned
Yeah.
for this interview with Bride Lawyer and with Sherry and Morgan, the attorneys that specialize in it. I think you're going to find it very informative.
Yep. I think so too. Great.
Bye.
You're engaged. That is just great. But right after that excitement, stress can sneak in like a surprise RSVP. Traditional weddings are beautiful, but they can also be expensive and complicated and, frankly, a little overwhelming. What if your wedding could be everything you dream of, minus the drama? At NJ Vows Now, we believe your special day should reflect your unique love story, not some outdated list of rules. You can have all the wedding and none of the stress. We have sweet little parks and pretty gardens from the Hudson River to the Jersey Shore to the lush forests of the North and the West. We'll connect you with a curated network of amazing vendors who will understand your vision and respect your budget. We're all passionate, professional, dedicated to making your wedding a relaxed, unforgettable experience. Yes, you still need a license, but we can help you with that too. It's fast, it's easy, and you can still throw a big party later if you want. Doesn't that sound great? Of course it does. So just ditch the drama, vow to be different, and reach out to us at njvowsnow.com. We will have the confetti cannons ready. Good morning, everybody. We are so excited to introduce Sherry Rivkine and Morgan Weil, the dynamic founders of Bride Lawyers. These two amazing attorneys specialize in helping brides and grooms go from feeling overwhelmed by all the possible legal details to feeling empowered by securing their futures with custom prenups, protecting their families with personalized wills, preserving their wedding investments, and reviewing and negotiating vendor contracts. So you're not alone and you don't have to feel stressed about doing something that you know absolutely nothing about. But the first thing we're going to talk about, I hope, is insuring that ring. So welcome to you. We're so happy that you're here, and we're so delighted that you're going to share some knowledge with our listeners.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. You want to talk about rings? Talk about
Yes,
rings.
let's talk about rings. So, you would be surprised how many of our brides and grooms, they come to us and their ring is not insured. What percentage would you say, Sherry?
I think it's almost like 80% of the we see. Crazy, right?
And
Yeah.
we recommend the moment you propose, get that ring insured.
Oh my
You can
gosh.
either do it with your homeowner's insurance.
Yes. And often jewelers will offer, have
Mhm.
different people they use.
And if you are in the position where your ring isn't insured and you do lose it or it's stolen,
Yeah.
you can certainly look into your homeowner's insurance policy and see, the coverage for.
There's usually a basic coverage. Sometimes it may be like even $100 or $1,000, a
Mhm.
small amount, but at least it's something. Another thing to look into is how you purchase the ring. Certain credit cards, like believe it or not, American
That's
Express
true. Yeah.
often has a thing and will pay dollar for dollar.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
okay.
and
All right. That's good to know. But still, I think making sure you have an insurance policy on it is so important. You always think it's not going to happen to you.
Right.
Always.
It
Oh,
does,
yeah, we've seen rings roll off boardwalks before, haven't we? Yes,
Oh,
we have.
I've seen rings lost. I live right by the shore. I've seen rings lost and on the beach actually.
Oh God.
A photographer trying to take that picture of it in a shell with the sand around and then they fall in the sand. They've had to call in somebody with the metal detector and the bride is
Yes,
crying
me
and the
too.
wedding's starting in an hour and and it's like what do you do, you know?
Oh
That's
my gosh.
tragic.
Yeah.
I
So
also I also think that what a lot of people are unaware is it's the first time in many people's lives that they are wearing expensive jewelry on a
Exactly.
daily basis.
yeah,
Exactly. On a daily basis. You're wearing it
So,
every day. Yeah, you're not just
yeah.
grabbing it out of the safety deposit box for that big event. It's on and it's and it's the beginning. You insure it. So important.
Oh, that's
Oh,
great. So now we have the ring together. What do we do next? Probably prenups, right?
right. Yeah.
it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Generally we tell most of our brides and grooms that starting right around the 6 month before the wedding mark is at least a good time to start.
That's a
Is
good
that
thought.
Is
Mhm.
that when they actually do it? No. When we see most of our brides and grooms closer to the like 2 to 3 month before.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
But the one thing that we really caution people, and it's what actually doing this regularly really taught us, is before you have that discussion with your future partner, you should see an attorney. And
Yeah.
you should really learn your own rights. Because what we find a lot of people doing is they sort of give in to issues to their partner before
Uh-huh.
they find out what the legal ramifications are.
And then
And
there's that expectation.
yeah, and there is no going back.
Right.
The
Right.
other partner sticks to it. Whereas if you knew more, maybe you wouldn't have.
Right. I think too, a lot of my couples as an officiant are older couples. That's their second marriage or maybe even third, whatever. And they might have, they're established. They both of them might own their own home. They have grown children. They've worked hard. They have a retirement account. They have, what their children might inherit and it's a good idea. It's very practical to have a prenup that protects you should something happen, and a will
Yes.
that protects you because without that, it seems to me, not being a lawyer, but it seems to me that everything goes to your spouse. But if this is you've had grown children, you might want your house going to your children, not to your spouse and your spouse's children from a previous, you're just protecting your family, and their inheritance, really,
Yeah.
No,
right?
Absolutely. I have to tell you, we have many couples come to us that are on usually a second marriage, but
Mhm.
once in a while we've had a third.
Mm.
And, it's a big concern. And, I think that usually protecting their children is their number one interest.
Right.
We see this in couples, not just on prenups, but also on cohabitation agreements where people are just living together.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about that because we have a lot of, I think by nature of just the kind of work that we do get a lot of second marriages and a lot of, not older couples in the traditional sense of like the age of people getting married. And it's a different set of circumstances in the background, isn't it?
No, it really is. I think, concern for children is really crucial. And listen, I personally had a similar situation. My daddy died when he was 67. And my mother for 10 years didn't date. But then she started dating, and the next thing, she actually at the time went online before it was like really a big thing. And she ended up meeting a man,
At
and
72.
at
All
72,
right.
Oh, wow.
she lied on her
Cool.
For me.
profile. He was 10 years younger than her,
Good for her.
right?
All right. You go,
And
girl.
to make a long story short, again, and we talked about it earlier, she would have had to have given up my father's, she had Social Security benefits by way of my
Mhm.
father and other benefits, and it
Mhm.
really would have been difficult. So here's a couple, and for 12 years they lived together, you
Yeah.
know? And
Wow.
it's really a situation where, we set up, significant things, including trusts and wills and everything to make sure that both the sides were protected and that their
Mhm.
children would get their assets and it wouldn't go to each other.
There are a
Yeah.
lot of scenarios like that. And again, as officiants, I've done commitment ceremonies for older folks that don't want, they just want to cohabitate because they don't want to lose the pension or the Social Security. The way things are set up,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a benefit to get married, and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
You'll lose too much, and then your quality of life would be affected. So yeah, cohabitation insurance, that's very interesting. I do know someone who and it's for a lot of reasons that they were older in their 70s and they got married and they were living in his family's his beach house. I live by the shore, so they had this beautiful beach house, but it belonged to his family, and it was going to go to the kids and stuff. And they were like, you have our blessings to get married, but you need a prenup because that comes back to us should you pass before she does. And they were all fine with it. It was a loving, very practical thing to do, to protect everybody. It was everybody was for it.
And I think that's what a lot of these, like the prenup conversation, it may seem daunting to couples, but we really do advise our couples to really approach it with, the love and care for your partner.
Mhm.
You're preparing this during the time that you both love each other. You want to do the fair thing for each
Right.
other. And when we represent our, brides or our grooms, we really want to create a fair agreement where both party wins. No one is
Right.
left unhappy. So, and in the event that divorce does happen, you did prepare an agreement that was done during a time where you really loved each other and wanted to do the fair thing.
Yeah,
Agreed.
it's true. And we were talking before, I had a couple that the bride was marrying into the groom's family owned a very large business here, and she was really kind of all for the prenup because she didn't want them to think that she had ulterior motives. She was marrying him because she loved him, not because she wanted to inherit the business, and it worked out beautifully.
I'll tell you, I had a recent case, which I thought was one of the sweetest, where for whatever reasons, the groom was sort of set up by some people and had ended up with a little white collar criminal record.
Oh gosh. Okay.
And and it
Stuff
honestly
happens.
it was a setup, and
Yeah.
unfortunately it happens often, so you got to be careful about these things. But she came to us because her big concern was his big concern, which was that she would be protected from anything
Mm,
that would have come out of his past record.
okay. Yeah. Important. Very important,
And he owed money jointly and severally with some other people. So he
Mhm.
had a big judgment against him and really wanted her protected. And they
Wow.
Which is
wanted
really
to
the
know what they
sweetest.
could do to make sure that her assets wouldn't be touched. It was
So,
great.
the truth is that's the way the world works. As much as you love each other and you're there for each other, you have to take a step back and realize how the world works. Should there be a judgment against you? Should one of you pass before the other? That's why the will is important. You come into the marriage both with your own assets. You know, and that's just the way things work, whether you get to collect the Social Security or lose it if you get remarried. These are things you have to think about,
Yeah.
beyond the, oh, I'll love you forever, there's
And it's
the
really great to have those conversations with our couples because it is something that you really should be discussing before you get married.
Yeah.
Marriage is a very serious thing. And I do
Legal
find,
contract.
especially with wedding planning, you're so consumed with, this production you're putting on.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And what
Right.
happens after that big wedding day? It's game day all day long, every day for the rest of your lives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a legal contract. It's a marriage, comes down to that, in that world. You have some great on your website, and I'll tell our listeners that we will be putting a link to bridallawyer.com, to the website, YouTube channel, and your Instagram account. So our listeners can just go right to it and click on it and check out their website. I do really like your books that you have on Amazon, easy to buy. Just click on, and it's, I'm getting married. What do I do now? And I'm married. What do I do now? And these are really practical guides to the legal aspect of getting married and, also from financing your homes, insurance, children, and more. So they're very helpful. Great books.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We worked hard. I always say it's sort of 37 years of my experience thrown into these things, and
Wow.
being a mother of four, and having a young bride who's in the midst of it.
Right. And I love incorporating, the current trends going on. And, a lot of my girlfriends were getting married the past 2 years. So we were incorporating a lot of the mishaps that were happening, even in their circumstances.
And
Yeah.
it's great to have a younger person involved in this, because marital law and family law is truly an area which is ever changing.
Mhm.
And it really, lately, with LGBTQ rights and all sorts of things
Yeah.
regarding living together, cohabitation agreements, everything, it's very changed from when I was younger.
And we live in a world that's very accepting. So it's going to be changing all the time. And we need to keep up with it. And that's what these books are for, you know,
Yeah.
a nice guide to refer to. And that's relevant to now.
And
So,
talking about changing times and things going on, I see that you also, and it makes me revisit my vendor contract. I was just talking to Celia about it. Maybe I
Mm.
need to revisit it. Why vendor contracts matter, to have you guys set up a contract, whether you're the officiant, the photographer, DJ, have a well drafted contract is so important, because we look back on things, because I was talking to Celia about things like after Hurricane Sandy, how was I affected? You couldn't,
Right.
things got canceled. And then, of course, the biggie, the pandemic, we legally could not do ceremony. Well, you couldn't gather. So what
Right.
happens with the contract? And how do you protect yourself if you get sick and whatever might happen? The importance of having a legal contract with your clients.
And, I always say generally problems with businesses result because the expectations are different. And often it's because it's not a properly written contract. If
Yeah.
you can really lay everything out with the what ifs and the this and cover as much as you can and really even go over it with them. I mean, a
Yes.
lot of brides, they're just signing
Just
away and it's like,
sign away.
read this.
They're so overeager. And, the ambiguous, clauses here and there. It's like, oh, we'll figure it out. It's like, no, no, no. You won't figure it out and will bite you in the future.
And it's usually, it can be silly things, from, we had a recent example where a venue, very glitzy venue, included a provision for a tasting.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been getting a lot of tasting questions.
have.
It's just very strange timing. But in this particular case, every one of the parents, the bride, the groom, they all assumed this was going to be a sit-down formal affair, private, just for them. To be, told that it was generally 2 months before the wedding, and then to be told that it's actually going to be, one big thing with lots of other brides and everyone, and it's buffet, and it's sort of hit
A chord.
everyone a little funny. And
Yeah.
again, if it had been clearly written in the contract, they would have understood what they were getting from the beginning, and it wouldn't put that little sour note into
And that's what
mix.
we recommend for all our brides and grooms. Make sure what is stated orally is actually put into your contract.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It really needs to be explicitly stated. And it has to be clearly stated because it protects both parties, not just the vendor.
And one of the things where I think a lot of people go amiss is they give you all these brochures, the vendors.
Mhm.
And sometimes, like for photographers, it's common to have packages, and they have gold package and silver package. But then in the contract, it doesn't spell out the particulars.
Yeah.
Legally, that brochure is, unless there's a statement that
Right.
says our brochure called XYZ is incorporated herein, it is not part of the contract.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. And there are some vendors that you want to make sure you're getting the person that you wanted, especially if they
Right.
have, 7 or 8 different photographers or DJs to choose from, and you liked the style of a certain one. You want that one to show up. You don't want, who's this person? Unless, of
really
course,
crucial.
unless there's an emergency and that person came down with COVID, and then we have to, there's always those things. But
And it's one of those things that, in that case, you have to specifically include the name of that particular photographer. You can't just go on an assumption that you will get the one you met with, the one whose work you love, that kind of thing.
yeah.
So true.
So it's so true. I sometimes people pick these, bigger agencies, and they're not going to have the chance to even meet their person until a couple of weeks ahead of time. And it's like, if that's something that you can live with, then that's absolutely fine. But, for something as big as a photographer or a DJ or an officiant for your wedding, I think you should know what's going to happen, right? I think
Recommend for our brides and grooms to meet them, at least virtually, because
Yeah.
you need to see if you vibe. If you don't vibe, it really could be a disaster. And, you're spending so much on this wedding. So you really want, to do that housekeeping and make sure that, you're making sure you are working with people that you really like because, this is your day.
Well, and these aren't the glamorous things to talk about, wedding insurance and, prenups and ring insurance, but, honestly, it's the kind of it's like having warm, dry socks. It just makes you feel like you're taken care of.
Yeah,
And, I
love
that,
that.
whatever happens, it's going to be okay. And I don't think it's a signal of mistrust on either party's part. I think in a way it's a signal of a real commitment to having everything being taken care of no matter what the contingencies are.
And I have to tell you, it's really why we got into this biz. It was sort of a passion. Morgan started, she was in the midst of it, and she felt, it was like a light bulb. If
Mm.
I'm having problems with dealing with all this, how about people who aren't lawyers?
Yeah.
And that's how we came up with Bride Lawyers. And can I
Well,
tell you from there? She came to me and I was just like, I love it. A little way, this is a little bit for me to give back. We
yeah.
try, believe it or not, to keep our prices really affordable because a lot of times we are dealing with younger couples or couples just
Mm.
starting out.
Mhm.
And it's just really, and that's why we started with the YouTubes and the
Yeah.
Yeah.
helpful guides and everything, and even the books. Because we really think, especially young brides, and even, second time brides, we want them to be educated, and so they can have that stress-free day down the
And
aisle,
there's like different mediums, especially with, social media nowadays. I want our information to be out there and for people to really, get it and get it easily. I want
Yeah.
it to be very accessible.
And not everybody needs a prenup. It's not necessarily
Mhm.
for, everyone. Some couples that are just starting out, they don't absolutely need one.
Yeah.
But they do need help signing, dealing with contracts and knowing what their legal rights are.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's great. And you are very easy to find and all your media is very friendly and warm, I think. I think, it I think what you really did to put this together is a way that really hits those couples in a way that's very understandable and welcoming.
Well,
Yeah.
I think, part of the fact is that we are a mother-daughter
Yes.
pair, and I think that surprises a lot of people. But it keeps it in the family, and it's just one of those things. We're expanding and expanding, and but um, it makes it that homey, warm feeling that we're embracing you, and let us
Exactly.
take care of you.
Exactly. And also, should we say, bring up groom lawyers?
Oh, yes. And I'll tell you, so, we do a lot of these expos and stuff. So a lot of times the guys come up to us, let alone her fiance.
Yes. Always kidding around, my lovey, always kidding around. What about the grooms?
And he joked, how about groom lawyer? And we finally, with all these guys coming up to us being like, how about us? We need something too. So we just recently we started a website and things for the grooms and
Oh,
working on a book for them as well. And
Because they do focus on different aspects of the wedding, and
Yes.
wedding planning and thereafter. And I know this for a fact because I'm going through it with my own fiance. He loves loves to focus on the food and the bands and even like, the marriage bands. It's so sweet. And um
no, that surprised us that he
yeah,
would be so into
and
it.
yeah.
our own customs. It's very sweet.
It just shows you the modern couple. You know what I mean? The brides it's an equal now, it's a modern couple. They're both involved and they're,
So
you
true.
know,
No, it's
everything.
so true.
Especially with people getting married later. It
Mhm.
really is a joint effort.
Yeah. Yeah. They're more established. They're both more established in their careers and yeah, it becomes more of an equal, um, planning of the wedding and getting
Mhm.
involved in that way. So on your website, there is the email us, the contact us. So clients can go right there, go to your email them, and with what information you might need and make an appointment. That's how it works, right?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And I will say, being the mother-daughter team, I think uh, it's very comfortable to ask you questions. I think, whatever question the bride might have or the groom might have about what they might need from you guys, I think it's very comfortable to go there and to ask those questions to get the answers on what they might need.
Yeah, and that's our hope that you
Mhm.
sort of, get two different points of view sometimes, or at least from two different points of view. The other
Okay.
thing to know is that we are New York and New Jersey attorneys.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's great.
So when you get a prenup, you really want an attorney who's licensed in the state
Okay.
where you're going to live as a couple.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So,
it, it will, and a big question everyone always asks me is, well, if I get a prenup done in New Jersey and I later move to another state, is it still valid? And the answer is yes.
oh, okay. That's good to know.
Usually people can put in something, a clause, for example, I want New Jersey law to control this, and other states will respect it.
Mhm.
And then there's some areas where the state that you live in at a time that you would get divorced, would control regarding certain aspects.
Right.
Okay, that's good to know. Good to know. All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for being with us today. A lot of great information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you. You guys were
Thank
lovely,
you.
and thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah.
Good. It's been fun to have you. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll have
Yes.
you up on our website soon, on our podcast website, so everybody can hear all this great advice.
All right.
Thank you so
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by New Jersey wedding officiant Andrea Pertel, owner of For This Joyous Occasion Officiating Services.
And Celia Milton, owner of NJ Vows Now, also New Jersey wedding officiating services. We're up in North Jersey, and Andrea is down in Central and South Jersey. So together we cover the whole state, don't we?
Yes, yes.